Hello everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for half an hour of sharing experiences, practices, difficulties, and exchanging ideas on an issue that I'm sure we've all come across with.
We definitely have. We are going to talk about differentiated teaching in a classroom full of mixed ability students. Unfortunately, there is no instruction manual, so we felt it might be a relevant issue to bring about in these sessions. In our abstract for this webinar, we raised the question, what does it mean to differentiate? It may be easier to start with what is not differentiated teaching. Well, teaching isn't differentiated when a teacher sets the same task for every student, provides little variation, assesses all students against a general criterion, applies differentiated teaching techniques only for gifted students or only for striving students. Actually, differentiated teaching occurs when a teacher plans a lesson that adjusts either the content being discussed, the process used to learn, or the product students are expected to produce, so that we can ensure that learners at different points in their learning curve, so to say, can receive the instruction they need to grow and succeed. I would say this is a fine definition, but all of us know that it is easier said than done. And we have prepared a short presentation in which we try to give examples on how to develop differentiated teaching practices using the multiplicity of resources we have available today in the course books we work with. We have structured our presentation around three basic questions. And they are what for, so to differentiate what for, what, and how. And let's start with what for. So first of all, to try to overcome the problem of standardization. Standardization, which is supposed to ensure equal access to education. In the end, it ends up by doing exactly the opposite, that is creating more inequalities. As we can see in the cartoon, Einstein could already depict our education system in a very accurate way almost 100 years ago. He said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Okay, besides this issue of standardization, we also have to deal with another idea underlying differentiation. Stigma, or labels people associate with it. Namely, that differentiation is for low achievers. We even have students that don't like others to know that they have been given different things to do or different goals to achieve. It is imperative to change this perspective. We need to start approaching differentiated teaching as a strategy to prevent failure and to foster success, and not just as remedial work for unsuccessful students. That's why differentiated teaching is part of our medidas universais that we are all familiar with. The next question is about what to differentiate. On the one hand, we have the contents, or domínios, as we now have them described in the aprendizagens essenciais. These contents are partially standardized and regulate, for example, the contents developed in course books. All of the course books have to follow the mandatory requirements issued by our education board, namely the performance level that they should work for. Thinking about the secondary level, this would be a B1.1 or a B1.2. We all know not all the students in the 10th or 11th grade have this performance level in the various skills. Therefore, we don't seem to have a lot of freedom in terms of contents or in terms of difficulty level. Our only choice is to be able to differentiate in our teaching practices. So differentiated teaching is ultimately focused on the process of teaching. It can be seen as a differentiated set of means and processes which will allow students of different abilities together in a classroom to achieve common goals by different means. This definition leads us to our main goal for this session, the how to put it in practice. Of course, there would be several ways of approaching this how, but we have chosen to focus on the 10th and 11th grades and on 4 practices of differentiated teaching that can better suit their expected level of proficiency. It doesn't mean that you can't adjust our suggestion to other levels of proficiency, obviously, For the sake of clarity, however, we needed to choose examples, and those will be from our course book, MySelfie 10. So these 4 practical suggestions will focus on materials. Here they are. Materials, students' production, classroom environment, and assessment. And assessment is probably the one we are more used to when we apply differentiation practices, maybe because it seems more objective somehow. So the relevance of each one of these practices will, of course, depend on the skills we want to work on. Obviously, not all of them can be applied when working the language or the speaking or the writing, but we can apply 2 of them or 3. It will depend on our teaching goals, as we will see a little further ahead. So in this table, in this next table, we can see a summary of the tools or options we have in each of the 4 practices we will share with you. Considering the materials, we can use additional resources or different resources. We can do it together with one of the options of classroom environment, individual learning, peer-to-peer learning, groups that can be specific needs, same ability or mixed ability.
Noemia, can you clarify what specific needs groups are?
Sure. The specific needs groups are groups we can create to assign the same task or even a different task, but with different goals, adjusting contents. And this is not discriminating, as some people might think. It is assigning tasks students can actually do. So why ask students to do rephrasing exercise with if clauses, for example, if we know that they won't be able to do it? Why not assign that specific needs group the same exercise, but with gap filling? They could even be asked to correct the rephrasing exercise from the other groups then. And students who are placed in a specific needs group for a given task may not need to be placed in the same group in later tasks or in tasks which work different skills. We really need to keep a flexible seating plan concerning groups. So getting back to our table, and I said we have the possibility of using additional resources or different resources. We also have the classroom environment, and we have the students' production, which is about giving students the possibility to choose different supports or formats to successfully complete a task. And this can involve setting specific goals or allowing different formats and supports, oral presentation, debate, exposition, PowerPoints, videos, etc., or even suggesting the same activity to develop different skills. So let me just share an example with you. Last month, I had planned a lesson to develop writing skills with a class of struggling students. My plan was to write a covering letter. While assigning the task, I soon realized it wouldn't work. They were really struggling with the task, stressing out, and I thought, why am I asking something they won't be able to do and will only add up to their frustration and mine? So I thought of something else that they could do and decided to change the task to a CV. I changed the assessment rubric and the criteria, and it ended up just fine. I got nicely done CVs, some of them very creative, and the students were enthusiastic and committed to the task, mainly because they realized they could do it despite their difficulties with the language. Okay, finally, we have differentiated teaching in assessment. And this is usually what we do. We adjust goals or assessment criteria. We change the type of exercises. We reduce the number of questions or allow extra time, etc. But when we do this, and that's fine, we are using differentiation as a remedial strategy, not as a preventive strategy. Of course, this is the ideal scenario, and we know the ideal is most of the times impossible to attain. So let's share some practical ideas on how to get at least a little bit nearer that ideal scenario. We have chosen resources from Unit 1 from the course book MySelfie 10 to use as examples, as I said before. Paula, where do you suggest we start?
Why not start with grammar? Our suggestion is to use strategy A, differentiated resources by using different or additional resources, and strategy C, classwork environment. And we'll focus our attention on the specific needs groups. As we said before, to make our suggestions clearer, we will be using examples from your course book, MySelfie 10. So, in Unit 1, one of the grammar items studied is clauses of purpose and contrast. I'll briefly explain how we thought out a lesson for this grammar item. We suggest starting with an activity for the whole class so as to have a common starting point where all students participate in. The explanatory videos in MySelfie are tools that allow us this kind of approach. At this stage, and in order to engage students who struggle with English, we suggest making straightforward and simple tasks for while watching. These are very useful to guide students in their learning process. Here is an example of how we would do it with the clauses of purpose. So the suggestion is to watch the video, complete the rules, and proceed with correction. Then we repeat the whole process with the clauses of contrast. It's throughout the practical stage that we suggest using differentiated practices, such as differentiated materials and classroom environment. For grammar, we recommend structuring classwork around specific needs groups. We group students according to their level of proficiency. Let's call them, only for the sake of our personal guidance, low proficiency and average proficiency. Then we assign to them different types of exercises. For instance, we'll ask the low proficiency group to do the exercises on page 73 and 215, which are slightly less demanding, and we request for the other groups to do pages 70 and 73. In the case of MySelfie 10, there are actually exercises of different levels which allow us to do this. Enabling students the possibility of working with grammar in small groups is quite effective, as they can discuss ideas, clarify doubts, making it more appealing and interactive to them. They may also feel safer saying their doubts to a smaller group. If available, we can also recommend all students to check some support material. In the case of MySelfie 10, they can find them in My GPS, which will definitely help low proficiency groups. While students are doing the exercises, we teachers should mingle with all the groups to check students' progress, to clarify any doubts, and we may even momentarily sit with one of the groups if additional help is needed. Then we correct the exercises with the whole class, starting off with the exercises assigned to the low proficiency groups. Finally, we can assign a common task with a slight difference. The exercises are the same. For example, in exercise 1, we've got multiple choice with two options in one version and 3 options in the other one. In exercise 2, it's a matching, so it's the same one. And exercise 3 has the exact same sentences, but with different types of exercises. One is gap filling and the other is rephrasing. Our suggestion is to ask students to do these consolidation worksheets. Then we correct exercises 1 and 2. However, we'll only ask students from the average proficiency groups the answers for exercise 3. The students from the low proficiency groups will decide if the sentences are correct, as they already have the structure of the sentences. They'll become more motivated towards the tasks assigned, more self-confident, as they realize that they can actually accomplish the goals intended. Another strategy for low proficiency students is to ask them at the end of the class to summarize the key points they've learned, either orally or even better in their notebooks. This helps them to reflect on the lesson and process new information. In case they struggle, we can always ask other students to help them.
Yeah, I have tried all of these strategies already, and they work just fine with my 29 student classes. Any suggestions for the reading and listening skills?
Sure. I believe that what works really well is the flipped classroom. In other words, we prepare our students for the following lesson, and for that we have to assign tasks students will have to do beforehand. videos, research, reading a selected text, dictionary work. The result? You'll have more collaborative classes where low proficiency students won't feel baffled and defeated. They'll feel more at ease to participate in class activities, and it will boost their self-confidence because they are able to follow the pace of the class and complete the required tasks successfully. Obviously, this implies having extra resources available. So, as an example, we have this reading, Influential Teens. What can we do as a preliminary activity? Well, first of all, prepare the reading itself. We usually invite students to read the text as a reading practice for pronunciation and intonation purposes, etc., etc. Our suggestion is to prepare reading before the following class is to provide students with the audio of the text. The audio is available for all texts in slow and standard version. We have a sharing tool that allows us to send the link to our students. We can send it to a class email, to any platform our school is using, anywhere really. Using this strategy, students will gradually become less anxious while reading and become more confident with their pronunciation and overall reading ability. Secondly, we should prepare comprehension. How? Well, depending on the degree of difficulty of the text, we can provide a list of words taken from the text. This list can be used as a glossary with a translation of the words, or even with expressions we have selected from the text. As a list of words or expressions the students have to look for in the text before class, with or without matching. If we opt for not using a matching activity, we can provide the words in English so that they find their synonyms, or even provide the words in Portuguese and they have to find the English word in the text. We can evidently always choose to make a few simple and straightforward questions so that the students can explore the text beforehand. Because we're making them purposefully so simple, we suggest they should be in English. Nevertheless, if our class has students with very low proficiency level, why not allow them to answer in Portuguese? It's your call. You are the person who best knows your students' proficiency level. One thing is sure, it's really important to highlight that the preliminary tasks must be simple in such a way that students will definitely be able to accomplish them and understand the text. Now, what about listening? Our suggestion is quite similar to reading since both are comprehension competencies. The emphasis continues to be preliminary work. What can we do as preliminary activities? Let's take a look at another example from MySelfie 10. Firstly, our suggestion is to prepare the listening exercise beforehand. So, yet again, we need to provide the students with the audio of the text, which is always also available in slow or standard version for all the texts. And we will use a sharing tool to send a link to our students. Another possibility is to share the written audio script of the text to complement the listening, which is also available. In the platform, you can check out the PDF version of the audio script booklet that you can download. If an exercise is based on a video, we can share it beforehand and suggest students watch it before class with the subtitles on. These may be used as audio scripts. Of course, you can always turn the subtitles off if you prefer. There is a subtitle tool on and off here. When we share, we can again use the suggestion about the list of words or the list of simple and straightforward questions. We are thus preparing our students beforehand so they can actively participate in class, since it's not the first time they are analyzing the texts. Obviously, there's always a little bird that will remind us, they won't do what you have suggested, no way. Well, it's possible, and we understand where you are coming from. However, maybe, and just maybe, if we make students see our effort, explain to the students the strategies and the goals, we can make them try these activities. If not always, at least most of the times. But let's be honest, we do what we can. Noemia, would you like to tell us about the production skills?
Sure. Let's talk about writing and speaking. And here I would suggest choosing from 3 of the strategies referred to before. And those would be the production, the classroom environment, and the assessment. Let's start with classroom environment. When I'm working with the writing skills, I like to do it in mixed ability groups or pairs. And why? It allows us to assign the same task with the same goals, with the same criteria. It allows the high achievers to help the striving students in a kind of tutorial strategy. But we can also work with same ability pairs or groups. And in that case, we have several choices. We can assign the same task with the same goals, but using different criteria, or assign the same task with different goals and different criteria, or even assign a different task with different goals and different criteria. And concerning the assignment of different tasks, this last one, I would say we need to think about another tool we have in terms of differentiated teaching, which is the student's production. That is the type of task we are going to ask the students to do in terms of format. Let's take the example of the speech. One of the possibilities of doing it in a different format, and I did it not long ago, is to ask for an informative or persuasive leaflet or a brochure, for example. A student, a pair, or a group chooses a topic to write a speech about. Imagine this. We can then choose another student, pair, or group of lower proficiency to do parallel work. They will have to do a leaflet on the same topic of the speech to introduce the event where that speech will take place. It's always a good idea to contextualize tasks, and we can apply this to many other scenarios. Another suggestion for a differentiated writing task in terms of format would be to produce a campaign video with subtitles to introduce the same event, something like these videos that we are going to show you now. Okay, these strategies don't mean that we won't have explicit teaching moments as previous preparation for the writing task. And we can use the video tutorials or work on some brainstorming and build a mind map of ideas, for example, to help students organize their ideas before the task. We can do it on the board or use digital tools like MindMeister or TreeSider. And we shouldn't forget to give students some writing or language tips, which might be really, really helpful, like this that we find on the section, My GPS. Okay, last but not least, we have the speaking. And as a production skill, the speaking allows for many of the strategies referred to for the writing concerning production, classroom environment, and assessment. So going back to our example unit, we suggest killing two birds with one stone. So we can reuse the writing task, the speech, if you remember, and make it into a pitch. The students already have a starting point and have their ideas organized, so we can assess two skills. We can ask the students who produced the formal speech to turn it into a pitch following the suggested steps and instructions. And the students to whom we have assigned a different format, the leaflet, can be asked to build a dialogue, for example, between two friends. One of them has read the leaflet or watched the video and is inviting the other to attend the event. Of course, we haven't said this before, but it goes without saying that when working on writing and speaking skills, another differentiated strategy commonly used is varying the length of time students may take to complete the task. But this is something we usually do, I believe. So these options will surely imply adjustments in terms of assessment, of course, namely in the goals and criteria, but it is totally worth it if it can lead more and more students to successful learning.
I totally agree, Noemia. However hard it may seem at first, differentiated teaching has a lot of positives. First of all, it is student-centered. It focuses on what the students' needs are and how can I, as a teacher, meet those students' needs. By doing that, I'm also acknowledging difference, accepting that students learn in different ways, at different paces, but ensuring that they all get to develop meaningful learning.
And do you know what I think the best outcome of acknowledging differences? Engagement. It totally increases the way students engage with and get excited about the task.
That's true. The fact is they feel they are involved in their learning process. They're not only given more support, adjusted to their needs, but are also given choices on the way they want to do that learning.
However, do you think it can be done for every single student?
No, of course not. That's a big con of differentiated teaching. It is impossible to ensure that every student's needs are met for every single lesson. It's incredibly time-consuming and resource-intensive for us teachers. It takes a lot of our time to change the way we teach things to different students. But I believe we don't have to do it every single day. Just try to include it in our practices more often.
Yeah, we can sure try, though we have to remember that differentiated teaching is not dumbing down the content, but rather developing some practices that can be unique for each student, but also help them to eventually meet the same learning outcomes.
And talking about learning outcomes, we really have to keep them in mind. Think about the final exams. Differentiated teaching is quite unrealistic when we're talking about standardized tests, as all students do the exact same tasks. Standardized tests and differentiated teaching clearly clash because we know as educators that different students might strive in different assessment environments, right?
Yeah, definitely. But there's nothing we can do about that. What we can and should do is to think about how we can adjust our practices to reach more and more of our students attending classes nowadays that are becoming more and more mixed ability every day.
Well, that is, after all, the story of a teacher's life. adapting to changes, moving on with the times, adjusting practices. Differentiated teaching is just another of many adjustments we have had throughout our careers. Is it challenging? Of course. Hard? Definitely. But in the end, we think it's totally worthwhile. We hope you have enjoyed the session, and we'll see you soon for another moment of shared experiences. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.